Thanks to the wonderful hosting of Stephanie Valentine, who is the principal at Springbrook. Thank you for hosting. If you need some interpretation help, we have some assistance in the back, and we also have some ASL support up front. I will say this is great that although it's always wonderful when there's a big crowd, but it's great when there's a small crowd because we can have some really kind of candid conversations and you get a lot of time and you can pretty much say whatever you want. This is really a time for me to listen and not to do a lot of talking, although if you've got a question, I'll do my best to answer it. But the reality is I really want to hear from you, not me talk to you. This is largely about the school system's budget. I do have some information that I want to share that'll be very, very brief, I promise. But I just want to say thank you for giving up some family time to be here. I know that it's during the dinner hour, that there's a lot going on. It's right after the Thanksgiving holiday, but it was really, really important to me to come to East County, to come to Springbrook, so that your voice could be elevated in this budget process. And I'm very curious if you think that we're on the right track, or if you think that we're focused on the wrong stuff, and if you think that there's other stuff that we should focus on. This is really a great chance to say, hey, what are you doing about this? Or have you thought about that? Or you really should be spending more money on this instead of that. This is a great time for that. I got a handful of MCPS people here. And I do want to thank everybody that the folks who live in this community outnumber the MCPS folks. That's a win. But one of the MCPS folks that's here is actually a member of the Board of Education, so I'm going to ask Laura Stewart to stand and say hello. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, she's just a stone's throw away, and she's interested to hear what you have to say. Kind of how this process works is that I take in a lot of feedback from our teachers, from our students, from our staff, from PTAs, from you, from even our labor associations, and from community members, and I build a proposed budget. I propose it to the Board of Education. Sometimes they make changes, sometimes they don't. And then they ask the county council for funding support to see how much of it we can get funded. Now, last year we made a pretty big budget request. And the goal of last year's budget was really to try and right the ship and make sure that what we were asking for lined up with what we were actually spending. And that was actually a problem. We weren't really doing that. And our county council stepped up in a really big way, and they did the right thing, and they supported the school system, and they almost completely funded the budget that was proposed, and they did it really creatively and really enthusiastically, and they deserve a lot of credit because it was kind of a big deal. This year, it's going to be a lot less complicated from what I can guess, unless, of course, you all have a lot of different ideas and you want us to build rocket ships or something like that. I think that's off the table, by the way. I don't think that we're going to do that. But I think it's important to know kind of what we've already heard so far and a little bit of the process, so I'm going to share some of that information. One of the things that I've heard already comes from our Board of Education. They met at a meeting recently, and they gave some priorities for me to focus on in this budget. They wanted us to be really attentive to mathematics. They wanted us to look at class size and see if we could reduce class size. They wanted us to look at support staff, in particular in areas like special education. They wanted us to take a look at that. They wanted us to make some more investments in safety and security. We've made some pretty big investments in safety and security. They wanted us to look at that even further. They wanted us to also be attentive to the health and wellness needs, not just of our students, but also our staff. And it says special populations, but let me tell you what this is referring to. They wanted us to give special attention to our students with disabilities and also to give special attention to our English learners. So those were the main priorities that I heard from the Board of Education. The process as it stands right now is that I've got a few engagements that are in this kind of public town hall forum style. We'll have a bigger one tomorrow virtually, and just because you attended today doesn't mean you can't come to something else later. As a matter of fact, I think it would be great if you shared your opinions in other settings, but obviously you've got to juggle family time too. But this process goes all the way until June. It's a really long process. It's 7 months of a lot of meetings and a lot of conversations before it's all final. But really what it comes down to is the Board of Education making a preliminary budget decision based on a lot of deliberations and a lot of feedback, and then County Council deciding how much they can fund, and then it coming back for kind of balancing. Some budget items that we focused on last year that we plan on focusing on again this year. I don't think that we are going to be able to fix every problem in MCPS overnight. I don't think that that's realistic. But I do think that if we have multi-year plans on how to fix some things, I think we actually will fix them. So some of those things, and this is probably the biggest one and the scariest one for me, is how we pay for our employee benefits. So in Montgomery County, our school system, our budget is very big. It's $3.6 billion spread across over 200 schools and nearly 30,000 employees. And the biggest part of our budget is salary and benefits. It's actually 90% of the budget. It's 9 out of every $10 gets spent on salary and benefits. We are a very people-focused organization. And one of the biggest benefits is making sure that our employees have access to good health insurance. Guess what? This is a problem for everyone in the country. We are what is called self-insured, which basically means that we cover any type of loss that we may have in our insurance plan. And I'm embarrassed to tell you that the school system for the last several years has not been funding its own employee health benefits the way that it should so that it breaks even. Most employee benefits plans actually have the opposite problem, where they actually have too much money in their employee benefits plan, and they either have to give it back to the employees, or they reduce rates, or they do a whole host of things. We have not done that very well financially. And a consequence of that is that we've got a very big hole to fill. And we have to work with our partners in our labor unions to make sure that we are not overcharging them in terms of their portion of the benefits plan, and that we are funding our portion adequately. And it's going to be a huge dollar figure. It's going to be probably the scariest single line in the budget in terms of big dollars, next to compensation. The good news with compensation is that we negotiate our labor agreements with our labor unions on a 2-year cycle, and we did all of that last year. So the dollar figure for what we spend on compensation has already been figured out. It's not something that I've got to go and renegotiate with anyone. It's actually a huge relief for me personally that we're not under any kind of pressure to lock in a deal or figure something out. We've already figured all that out. And so 90% of the budget, it's already figured out. That's great. But that 10% that's left is where we see things like academic programs, where we see things like transportation, where we see things like maintenance. Those are all things that are really, really big initiatives that we need to make sure cross the finish line. As I mentioned earlier, this was a Board of Education priority, but it's also something that we invested in substantially last year, is safety and security. Can I tell you, I think we did some things right, but then there's some things that I don't think we did right. I don't think that we invested enough in training to make sure that our security assistants have the knowledge to do their job effectively. and that they have ongoing training and not just an orientation into how to do their work. And there are some things that we want our security team members to be able to do to help de-escalate situations instead of making a bad situation worse. So I think there's just a long way for us to go in that space, and there's room for improvement, but I think that this is a good starting spot. Something that I think that we've all been kind of scared about in this community, and I think that we've been rightfully scared, is what kind of impact this federal government is having on Montgomery County. And recently, we have tried to do a couple of engagement events for furloughed federal workers. We want to open our doors for employment opportunities in MCPS, but there's a bigger picture here that I think that we've also got to be really aware of, and that does kind of frighten me a little bit, is that we do receive some federal money from the federal government. And the areas that we receive the money is some of the areas that we need it the most. The federal government does fund a lot of our support for special education. It funds a lot of our support for our Title I schools, and if you're not familiar with that, it is providing additional supports for some of our low-income school communities. It also provides support for our English learners and even some support for career and technical education. Well, the big question that has me very nervous is, what if that goes away? And what's our backup plan for that? And have we thought through that? And so we're trying to come up with a plan to make sure that we're covered, and so that we're not interrupting any service to the kids should there be a massive change at the federal government because our friends in Washington, D.C. can't behave themselves. So those are things that we've been paying attention to, and that were a part of the last budget. I'll get to a question in 1 second. The last little piece, and I think that this is the end. This is the end, right? Okay, this is the end. Some other things that we've heard when we've had the same conversation in other places. This is not our first budget conversation. This is actually towards the end of some of our budget conversations, is that we need to continue to keep our foot on the gas with math and literacy. I gotta tell you, I couldn't agree with this more. This past year was the first year in a little over a decade where we saw growth in both math and literacy in the same year. The bad news, yeah, it's great, but the bad news is that we've been kind of on this slow decline for the better part of the last decade and a half. And this is the first year that we've got a little bit of a bump heading in the right direction. And so we're starting to see some positive performance changes, but we need to see more positive performance changes. And so I'm hearing loud and clear from people that we need to continue to invest in math and literacy. We staff our schools based on ratios. A certain number of students equals a teacher. And that's normally how a lot of school systems staff their schools, except that we have one small thing that's not awesome. We have staffing ratios that are guidelines. They are not hard and fast rules. And so schools that are really good at lobbying for and asking for positions have traditionally done very well in terms of staffing. And I gotta tell you, I don't think that that's fair. And so switching from a system that has guidelines to a system that has standards and rules will protect schools and school communities that have been underserved and understaffed. And so having hard and fast rules has been something that is a logical next step for us as a school system. Special education, we did a lot with special education last year. I'm a little embarrassed to tell you that the work that we did in special education brought us up to where we told people that we were staffing. It didn't actually improve our staffing in special education. There is a big request, particularly from elementary schools, in extra support with special education. Elementary schools if you can remember back to this experience with your kids, or if you have kids in elementary school right now, a lot of kids get found eligible for special education services in elementary school. And so that testing, that support, those initial meetings, it takes up a ton of time, it takes up a ton of resources, and elementary schools are really struggling to make sure that they can cover all the bases. And so that's been a big push for them. I mentioned professional development for safety and security, but truthfully, it's kind of professional development across the board. It's been a really, really long time since our teachers have had the expectation of very focused professional development on content. The focus has been on a lot of different topics, and a lot of those topics have been voice and choice, which is great, meaning that people kind of pick whatever they want to do, and that's awesome. Hey, that's great. But I think that there really does need to be a district push for, we are going to do literacy professional development. This is what we're going to do as a district. This is what we're all doing together. We're going to do math professional development. This is what we're going to do as a district. This is what we're going to do all together. We're going to be focused on restorative justice. This is what we're going to do as a district. This is what we're going to do all together. Whatever the topic is, having a unified approach and a system of accountability has been something that folks have asked for. Something that came up in the conversation that we had upstairs, and that has come up in every school in MCPS that wasn't built in the last 3 or 4 years. The facility maintenance of our schools has really fallen by the wayside and needs a lot of help. I loved a suggestion that I heard upstairs during the PTA meeting about making sure that we're staffing the building service workers and making sure that we have adequate staffing in that space. That will make a huge difference already. It is a high vacancy position that we have right now, and it does need a lot of help, and that's something that we have heard. Accountability measures. Interesting about this one, because this is something that doesn't cost very much money, but is super important to the work that we do. That if we set an expectation, that we hold ourselves to that expectation and we have follow through. And I gotta tell you, this is the difference of what is gonna make MCPS a great school system for the future or not. Is that if what we say and what we do lines up and we hold ourselves accountable to that, that's what will make us a good school system. We're already, Montgomery County is the best place to live, to work, to learn. It's a great community, but it doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. We have a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot that we need to focus on. There's a lot that we need to do, but not starting or just ignoring some of the glaring problems that we have isn't going to make them go away, and it certainly isn't going to make them better. So with that, I really don't have a ton more to say, but I really would love to hear from you, and we've got some microphones up, and I think your friends and neighbors would like to hear from you too about things that are important to you, that you're like, have you guys thought about doing this? I really like that you're focused on math, you know, whatever's in your heart that you want to share in terms of what you think would make the school system better, or ideas that you have that might make the school system better. We'd love to hear from you. And so you had your hand up first, so you get to go first to the microphone. And if you don't have to do this, but if you are comfortable saying who you are and that you've got a kid in whatever school, it just is helpful for context that I know you're coming from an elementary perspective or a high school perspective or what have you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Khadija Kiruri, and my son goes to Springbrook. He's in 10th grade. My question was, how much of the budget depends on the federal government? Like, what percentile does the federal government fund?
That's a great question. So she asked what percentage of the budget is coming from the federal government, And I've got my chief financial officer, but let me see if I can get it right. It's less than 3%. Yep.
Okay, so we don't really need him.
Oh no, we definitely need it, but it's still, it's 3% that if it went away tomorrow, we would have to figure out how we would deal with that. And so, I mean, you're pushing already millions of dollars.
Out of 10%, I guess
Yeah.
we're gonna work with 7%. Okay.
Yeah.
So my second question is in mathematics. How many students are in a math class average?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. So the worst answer that I have for you is the truth, is that it depends. And the part that I don't like about it is that it shouldn't depend. That we don't have a set ratio that is consistent from school to school to school or classroom to classroom to classroom. I can tell you that the higher level math that you go in high school, the smaller the classes are. But that's not necessarily a good thing either, because where a lot of students are struggling is in the fundamental computational skills of algebra. And getting over that algebra hump is so important, and those are some of our biggest math classes, and they really shouldn't be.
So my son is an AP pre-calculus. Last 2 weeks ago, they had where you go to class and you pretend, listening, whatever.
That's your mic drop right there.
Oh, sorry.
AP pre-calc.
And so he's an AP pre-calculus. I decided to drop in the class just to, observe. It was a lot of students.
Okay. I'm
And
surprised by that, but that's
The
good.
teacher's like, I tell them to do their homework every day, but I really don't check the answers. And it's just like she's hoping that they did their homework correctly and check themselves.
That
And
makes
my
me very
son
nervous.
is not really doing his homework, but that's another issue. But I'm just saying, like a class like that should not have more than, I don't know, it was like 30 kids in AP pre-calc. I don't remember anything. I was like, wow, it looked hard. I don't know. But I just feel like the class should have been smaller maybe, because it's AP, right? So, okay.
So what I'm hearing you say, and I'm going to translate this, is that when folks are asking for class sizes to be smaller, that you agree with that and that we should be leaning into smaller class sizes.
Exactly. And then another thing, I kind of blame myself. Last year, I decided this year I'm going to be participating in PTSA, because last year, apparently they changed the rule this year. So instead of, you only have 10 days to submit your work. So if you miss that, your grade is gonna drop.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, these grades affect our kids, and it determines the school they're gonna, or college they're gonna pick, right?
Yeah.
And we in East County, most of us have 2-3 jobs. My mom had 3 jobs. You know what I mean? She didn't have time to look at my homework. I don't have time to be like sometimes I'll do whatever, or he'll miss school or whatever, and the 10 days have passed. So he misses that chance to make up for that grade. Those grades are not inflated for us. It might be not inflated to Potomac people, but for us, we need those extra time. And the fact that we get a syllabus weekly, that's not fair to us. Whereas in college, if you're taking AP pre-calculus, they'll tell you, Khadijah, you're gonna have a test on Wednesday.
Yeah, you get it for the whole semester.
You have a whole month.
Yeah.
I'm like, you need to stop partying, you need to study for this. He only has a week. And I have to be like, you need to do your homework. Or I only have 10 days. That's not fair to me. If you're gonna grade it at that level, we need a syllabus, because he's taking college classes that are gonna affect his future.
So I'm glad you brought that up too, because I think that that's an easy fix. So for an AP class to be taught, they actually have to submit a full year's syllabus in advance to the College Board and get that syllabus approved. So good news, we've got it. I don't know why we're holding it back. We can figure that out.
They only do like weekly. And my
Yeah,
daughter's in
it's
middle
nuts.
school. Same thing. She's like, oh, I do it during TAP on Mondays. That's when you're gonna know when the test is gonna be. I'm like, she's taking geometry. This is gonna go to a college transcript, and you do it weekly. You're not giving me enough time to sit with my kid and explain to her. For her, math is not as easy as the brother, but it's on me, and you're gonna affect her future too. So if you could, like,
That seems like something we can fix. That's
you.
good.
And then another thing, I wrote to the Board of Education. I got a chat box reply back to me. That's how I feel like. Whoever wrote me back, it felt like AI. Because my kids use AI, I could tell. I was like, really? I've seen this before.
That's awesome. Very good. All right, Risha, you're up. And you guys can just stand up. Nobody's got to raise a hand. We're like a small enough group.
Hi.
All right, Risha, tell us what's up.
Yeah, I'm Risha George. I have a 9th grader here at Springbrook, so I'm new to Springbrook. And I also have a 6th grader at White Oak Middle School. I had a question about programs analysis, and it kind of builds on the topics that were brought up at the PTSA meeting. So, I know there's the vote that will happen, I think, in the spring of next year at the Board of Education. There just doesn't seem to be a whole lot of detail. I think it's an admirable effort, what you guys are trying to achieve in terms of equity across the county. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of detail available yet about how equity will actually be created. I know a couple of people brought up the IB program. So my son is also in the IB program here. When I look at the test data for the IB tests that you take when you're upperclassmen, the test data at Springbrook shows like less than 5% of students are scoring the 4s and the 5s on the IB test, right? And when you look at Richard Montgomery High School, 95% and above are scoring really high. I know you said you want to make an investment. I haven't heard any detail in terms of what that means. Like, what is the financial investment that will be made? When I talk to the IB, I don't know what her title is, the coordinator here, they're like, it's going to be business as usual for us. Nothing's going to change here at Springbrook. But it doesn't, the two aren't really adding up. And it just seems like a lot of the detail that is to be worked out with the program's analysis effort is only coming after the Board of Education vote to choose to implement it. So can you speak to how we're going to get an equitable program here?
Totally. So thank you. And that should be top of mind, especially in this area in particular, because I would probably describe this community as having some programmatic desert spaces, that there's not been the investment that there should have been in launching a regional IB or even school-based programs to get them off the ground and to keep them sustained. As I mentioned, for the folks that were a part of the PTA meeting upstairs beforehand, we currently spend $0 on regional programs right now, and transportation opportunities are somewhat spotty. And so I think that we achieve equity in a couple of ways. The first way is through access. Right now, there is constricted access based on 2 factors, transportation and seat availability. Right now, we intentionally constrict seat availability. We have more than enough students who are eligible and could receive and have access to high torque, high performing programs like IB or other STEM and engineering programs, other criteria-based programs, and candidly, they don't. Just even looking at the volume of kids who apply to, say, the countywide IB program at Richard Montgomery. You have 1,000 applicants and 90 kids get in. What about the 900 kids who don't? Well, of the 900 kids that don't, you take a look at their performance. There is very little that distinguishes their performance from the 90 kids who actually got in. So what on earth are those 900 kids doing? Well, sometimes they will access a regional program, sometimes they won't. I think that a regional program could be thriving if you are offering a full complement of courses, if you are providing transportation, and you actually are resourcing it not to the disadvantage of the rest of the general staffing. I appreciate the position of the IB coordinator at Springbrook, but they're not part of the planning, so I don't make an affront to them. And they have no reason to believe that anything would be different, because candidly, there hasn't been a vote that would suggest that anything would be different. So I do appreciate that. I think that we could stand up really high quality programs in every region around the county for about $1 million a year per region. I do. And in our budget, and by the way, in this next budget, very little, not quite zero, but very little, because there wouldn't be students activated until the following year. I think that $1 million or even $2 million per region, if we really wanted to double down, would create the level of equity of access that we are trying to achieve, and to tap into clear talent pool that's in each area. And in the scope of our budget, that's very affordable. It's actually remarkably affordable. I also don't think that the kids should be paying for field trips. I think that we should be picking up the tab for that. I don't think that the kids should have fees associated with labs or anything else, that we should be picking up the tab for that. And that would be a very different dynamic than what we've had before. The other piece of equity that is somewhat missing in some of the conversation, and probably needs to be elevated, is equity of outcomes and performance. I think that the richer the program is, and the more that is invested in terms of the faculty with professional learning and those enrichment activities, you're gonna get the outcomes that follow. The reason that some of the programs on the other side of the county are thriving and are doing so well is that they have a long-standing history of having an existence. They have an alumni base and a donor base and a fundraising base that is covering the cost for a lot of that enrichment activity that we're just not providing here. And it's no fault to the school, and it's no fault to the program, but there really hasn't been the expectation that, no, I'm sorry, we're actually gonna perform at a higher level, and we're gonna have this expectation, and we're gonna provide you the support to make sure that you get there. Because that's what's happening in the other part of the county that's not happening here. I think it's a tremendous opportunity. I think it's interesting that you said that there isn't a ton of information, and I think we probably need to do a better job of pushing that out. We have actually created more information about launching these programs than any other programmatic launch in the history of MCPS times 10. And if anything, we have fleshed out course sequences and a budget. And I actually went back and looked at some information the last time we tried to launch a program. Actually, a board of education member had done this, and then I even asked her for the links, and I was like, send me what you were looking at, I'm kind of curious. And it was the launch of the Global Ecology program at Poolsville. They had a one-sheet info sheet to go on to launch their program. It's a very successful program in the county. We have about 1,000 pages worth of background research, as well as course sequences, as well as budgets. There is no shortage of information in terms of fleshing this out. Standing up programs is not hard. It actually isn't. Deciding whether or not you're going to stand up a program, that's the hard part. And what level of quality you're going to commit to up front. Does anyone know what the metric is for MCPS deciding whether or not to transport students for a program? We have a really simple metric. It's whether or not we had money at the time that we started the program. I cannot think of a more inequitable setup. But tell me if that's not the most MCPS thing you've heard all week. But it's so true. We would transport students to a program if we had money at the time that the program was set up. And if we didn't have money at the time that the program was set up, we don't transport the kids. So you have these gross inequities just on the access question alone, and it does have a determining factor on whether or not there's going to be success. If there wasn't a willingness to commit to the transportation piece, I would tell you right now, this is a dumb idea, don't do it. Unless you're willing to commit to the access and transportation piece, this would be a waste of time, a waste of breath, a waste of energy. But if those two are together and there's a financial commitment, there's a resource commitment in addition to the willingness to do program launch, I think our probability of success goes way up. I am far more concerned about the 85% of kids who don't access a regional program than I am about the kids who do. Because candidly, I don't think that regional program access is going to be a problem, and I don't think performance is going to be a problem either. I think that we've got a ton of talented kids in East County that are going to thrive in this space and are just going to be fantastic. What I am very concerned about is that we maintain a trajectory for kids who don't want to do that they get really great opportunities, even if that's not one of them. And so every high school in East County needs to have other things that make it special and that make it unique and that have great opportunities. I gotta tell you, I'm glad that your kid is taking AP Pre-Calculus, but I gotta make sure that they also have access to AP Calc AB and Calc BC. And that if we don't have Calc BC in every high school, that's a problem. So I think that there's a lot of work for us to do to make sure that there's a great high school experience, whether you go to Northwest or Seneca Valley or Walt Whitman or Wooten or Springbrook or Paint Branch, that no matter what corner of the county you live in, if you want to choose to send your kid to your home high school, that it needs to be an awesome experience and that they have great outcomes as a result of that. That to me is the more pressing issue. You want to, yeah.
Hi, my name's Lynn Ho, and I have a son who's a junior at Springbrook High School, and I also have a daughter, a sophomore at Montgomery Blair. So I wanted to first thank you for coming out. I know it's a lot of time as well on your side and sharing information. What I like, I'm so glad to see that on the priority there is a section that the board highlighted regarding to special population and also reduced class sizes. I think being on the east side of the county, this applies, I can see it directly applied to a lot of school here. And as you mentioned, the outcome is the most important piece, right? So having those pieces in place is gonna, regardless, special program or not, we want every student to have that outcome. Having a smaller class size, more staff, as well as have more funding. I mean, I'm glad to hear supplies changing, but that's just the beginning. To me, there's so much that needs that additional support. As you can see, most of the county has lots of funding, as you mentioned, right? Here, parents are working multiple jobs. We want to be involved, but it's difficult, right? So I think in order to have that same outcome, we need to invest at the level that's going to allow that to happen. So that's one thing I want to actually see, have some distinction on kind of the operating budget piece to close that gap. The other thing, I just want to piggy back onto the regional program. I think there are a lot of information, but I think the concern that we have is that while we do have a lot of students we think can go into these programs, but we need to start from the younger generation. We have to start from elementary, middle, so we can't just invest in the high school programs. We have to start from the beginning because that builds their love for learning, that builds the basic knowledge all that background that allows them to then get excited about the program. If you look at Region 2, which is very similar to the NEC, plus Sherwood only, it's difficult to get that number, especially now you're going to have an IB, you're going to have a math science and computer science. Some of the students may then be stretched across these two programs. So in order to offer the same level of rigor as, we just asking, we need to make sure that's happening. We're building our pipeline to make sure that we can get that through. And some of these will be smaller class and being willing to invest. We may not say, oh, we have to have 8 or 9 students to start a class, but we may have to start somewhere to begin with.
Thank you. That's awesome. I couldn't agree more. Can I tell you something that's making me really nervous? Mm-hmm. You're gonna hear an awful lot about this in the spring, but I think it's noteworthy to point this out because we were definitely planning on proposing something that was going to be very middle school forward. And don't get me wrong, that absolutely needs to come, and even elementary school kind of backward mapping. Mm-hmm. I do think it's important to begin with the end in mind. We begin in high school and kind of work backwards to build that pipeline. I think that we do have a cohort of kids who absolutely can do the high performing stuff now. It would be better if we had more programmatic opportunities that drifted earlier on, but I do want to share something that has me very nervous. The state education department has made a really significant shift that's going to dramatically change what middle school and even high school looks like to a certain degree in the next couple years, and it's going to kind of catch us all off guard, and I don't think that it's been publicized very well, and we're still kind of trying to get our head wrapped around it and make adjustments to prepare for this. The 2 shifts that they made, one I think is ultimately going to be positive, but it's still going to require some adjustment, and then one I think is going to be really hard for us to understand. The easier one is a requirement to have 60 minutes of mathematics instruction every day. I actually think that could be really good, especially at the middle school level. If that's a K-8 expectation, there's a lot of elementary schools that are already doing this. That's not a huge burden, but at the middle school level, it's going to require a massive schedule change. And I'm very nervous that might come at the expense of an elective. And a lot of our kids are very engaged in their elective opportunities at middle school, and it may force us to have to be very selective about what that looks like. Ultimately, I think it's going to be a good thing, but I do think that there's going to be some hard conversation in between talking about it and thinking about it in implementation, and it is going to require some adjustment. That's the easy one. The hard one is a shift away from mathematics as we have thought about it in terms of discrete subject areas like Algebra 1, geometry, Algebra 2, statistics, to a approach to mathematics that is an integrated mathematics course where it's algebra, geometry, and some other types of math that are interwoven, and you may have a course sequence that looks like Mathematics 1, Mathematics 2, Mathematics 3. I think it's going to be hard for us because almost everybody in this room probably took Algebra 1. And we have at least an idea about what that might mean, and we all probably took geometry. And we have an idea in our minds about what that means. Oh yeah, that's the course with shapes. Like we have an idea. And so we're getting further and further away from the experience that we had with mathematics and what our kids' experience is with mathematics. Several years ago, Maryland also made the switch to Common Core mathematics. Didn't go well. It was a big shift away from computational math to a theoretical math. And the biggest change in that shift is that we were no longer able to help our kids. Well, I'm a little scared that we might be going in that kind of direction and widening that gap and not narrowing that gap. I think that is likely to have a bigger impact on things that we do in the future than anything else that we're talking about academically. And that's what makes me nervous. But it's top of mind, it's in the back of my mind, it's something I'm definitely, and you're gonna hear an awful lot about it in the coming months, because there's no way that we can make any kind of big change like that without a lot of community conversations, especially if you have middle schoolers or elementary schoolers, because it's gonna impact them in a really significant way. If you got a high schooler, congratulations. You got off on this one. You're gonna be okay. But
Just a quick follow-up for the regional program. I know they're still starting at high school, but is there any decision on the middle school level what that would look like? Would there be magnet schools within each region that would
yeah,
then help feed
I
in?
think there's a little bit of a pause on evaluating the middle school until we have figured out this math situation, because I think it's going to influence it so dramatically.
Okay.
In a perfect world, I would say yes, that there should be some feeder opportunities that make sense. I think we were all geared up and ready to go in that direction, but
Yeah, and the other question is, does it impact in the special ed? Like, for example, there's certain school with the LFI program, there's certain school with certain.
oh yes.
Does that get regional only, or is that separate, as well as some of the language immersion programs, because we have certain pieces? So how would that all, is that being looked at holistically across the board?
It is being looked at holistically. I can tell you that one of the things that we don't do very well with special education, and I'm going to let you in on a little bit of a secret. I don't think it's proper the way that we do some of our special education programs, because I don't think we're serving students as close to their home school as the law would want us to. And so I think that there's an opportunity for us to revisit program alignment for special education services as well, because if you've got a student who's waiting at a bus stop and their sibling gets on one bus and they get on a different bus, there might be a problem, especially if they're going to a secondary school, because we should be able to serve every student at a secondary school that's their home zone school. We don't. So I think that there's definitely a chance to look at that. Language immersion, that's a whole nother great question. I think that there's a couple of schools of thought. I know that there are whole school models that we lose a lot of kids to COSAs because they don't necessarily want to participate in the language immersion program. And if we were willing to be flexible to have non-language immersion classes in some of those schools, we might actually be able to expand language immersion to more schools, and to have non-language immersion and language immersion in the same school, we might actually be able to serve more areas and have fewer COSAs as a result. So I think that there's an opportunity to explore that. That hasn't been like top of my list, but that is definitely something that you'd want to look at the elementary experience, then the middle school experience, and what the pathway looks like in the high
Especially
school.
the pathway to IB. 'Cause that's
Yeah.
a big
Oh,
part.
yeah. Absolutely. All right. Jump up, and I think we'll take a couple more for sure. So,
All right,
Hey.
hello. My name is Elma Diggs. I am
repping Galway.
yes, I'm a Galway mom, PTA president at Galway. I have a second grader and a fifth grader. And so my first question goes, as MCPS, I don't think there's a week that goes by we're not hearing equity, equity, equity.
Good.
But when third grade is a very consequential year for testing and
Huge.
just, GT identification and whatnot. And so going through that with my now fifth grader, I found it to be a very inequitable process. We know historically Black and brown students have not tested as well, but the main indicator for getting into these programs have been testing. Luckily for me, I have a lot of people that work for MCPS, and I knew the right questions to ask, so I was well positioned to advocate for my child. My child has gotten into all those programs and it's thriving, but if it was only for test scores, he would have been weeded out. And so I'm looking at his educational experience now. He's taking creative writing, and it's such a different pathway, but I was able to advocate because I had the information. So if we're talking equity, how do we then, before we even get to middle school and we get to high school, identify third grade that we're empowering parents to be able to advocate? And why do we have a system set up that's not equitable to identify our gifted?
Preach. So can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What do you think would be most helpful to the most amount of parents to in addition to changing the system, which I'm all for, and I'd love some suggestions on that. But I would be curious, like if you were advising your best friend who is having a similar situation, but they've got a second grader, like what would you tell them?
So I will tell you it's about how we access information. And quite frankly, MCPS floods me with so much information that I tune 90% of everything out. What I do pay attention to is what comes home in my kids' backpack. I pay attention to what my kids' teacher sends me. And in second and third grade, we are in tune with that. Like, I'm reading those and I just literally can't deal with all the information MCPS is flooding us with. And so if we want to say, let's focus in on it, there needs to be an information sheet sent home to say, parents, here's your cheat sheet. This is coming up, and I'll tell you, no, I did not know. Luckily, I had, like I said, I have
Like
people
step by step.
Yes, like
just
this.
do this, do this, do this.
Because I now can tell other parents, hey, this is coming up. Because these testings, they will send home, do you think your child is smart? Do you think, like, it's just, you get something, you have no idea what you're filling out, right? And you're like, maybe. And so we don't know how to advocate. And so, like, I knew that, like my third grade year, I was able to meet with the teacher, express my needs,
Right.
So I was able to do that. So if we had something that came home that said, this is it, this is how you advocate, and and really be able to get the information out. I think once parents have information and have information on time, we're able to then access it. But if we have a week to be able to get prepared. No, I think also for you tapping into your PTAs, because we're able, like, we do comparative analysis with what our principal sends out. She has a 10% open rate on her emails. We have a 60% open rate on our emails. So we're able to get information out. So if we want something reiterated, it's going through PTA, right? And so so how and it goes back to elementary school and the resources, right? So I'm gonna send it back to you. Where do you want to invest your money in? It's going to be making sure, because I come from a family of teachers. I don't think we need to put one other thing on our teachers. They're social workers, they're everything else, and we expect them to instruct at
they got a lot going on.
And I don't, but then it comes down to how are we leveraging the other support staff within the school? Are there ways that we can train them? Are there ways that we can look into what gaps needs to be met to make sure that we're actually meeting the schools where they are? And to say that we have a one-stop shop for everything, it's not realistic. My school has nearly 90% farms rate with a huge ESOL population. And so in order for me to meet students where they are, I have to also reach out to, like, my Hispanic population. We have to have separate meetings to empower that community, hear from that community. And so if we're really gonna invest in that, is meeting the schools where they are.
That's great. So I actually have a suggestion too on system change. So I think that we have looked at some programs like gifted programs or whatever you want to call them, accelerated programs, maybe through the wrong lens. And I've had some success with this in other places, and I think that there's an opportunity to try something different. So I think that we've been looking at it not through the lens of like traditional characteristics of kids who are gifted, but maybe through like, are you highly abled and does your parent help you with their homework? And that does create inequities. I am a huge fan of measures that are not necessarily the academic measures to identify acceleration. For example, I love the COGAT, the Cognitive Skills Assessment Test, and also the creative subtest. The kids who thrive in the creative subtest actually don't always align with they don't always get the highest MAP score or whatever, but tend to thrive in accelerated settings. And if anything, they become higher performers. And as a consequence of that, the classrooms are also much more diverse as a result of that, because it takes away some of those biases that you've identified. I think that that's great. And I think that your experience as a parent in terms of like, you're checking your kid's folder. You know why? Because that's about as much bandwidth as any parent has, is to check your kid's folder. And unless it's a snow day, fingers crossed for tomorrow? No? No? Delay? What are we talking? Any bets?
It's too early.
It's too early. Okay.
Yes. Can't jinx
You
it.
probably don't want to hear from us, right? And candidly, if you're hearing from us, we are like the bad news bears. We bring not great news. We're telling you about a lockdown at your school, or we're telling you about a gas leak, or we're telling you about something else. And maybe it is through other channels that we come up. I got to tell you, I love the idea of having like a step 1, step 2, step whatever, and we stick it in your kid's folder. I think that's awesome.
And I would say, I think an untapped resource that we have are the students. I was recently reading about how this generation is leading so many charges happening, right? So if we don't have the bandwidth, what about tapping into SGAs? What about building up that they have a voice, that they're able to, because there's power within, and like, the ability to be able for them to empower themselves and for them to be able to see change, bring about change. I think that's such
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about that real quick. I know we got somebody else who's waiting to talk, but like, what do you mean by that in terms of like helping with this space?
So if we have a problem and we need a solution, the kids are there also, and so it's bringing it to them, SGA, right? And so if we need to be able to talk through some of these, get some of these solutions.
Just get their perspective.
Get their perspective, and then actually find, like, we have a student member of the board. How are we leveraging that student member of the board to be able to come back to the schools and get that student board, like empowerment? And so I think there's a lot of space within this generation. They're very connected, they're very empowered, they're very whatever information they're getting. And so it's, how do we leverage that? So we have limited ability, but we have such a rich resource with our students. Sorry, I have one, I know someone else, I'm gonna ask this question, I'll sit down. But talking about accountability measures, and I think transparency is huge with that.
Yep.
And so we were talking upstairs earlier about staffing. I believe NEC has some of the lowest HVAC rates for filled positions. If we had that data up somewhere, we could easily get it. I think that's also ability for us to be able to come back and say, hey, so as we're talking accountability also happens with transparency. And it would be great for us to do the hard thing and actually show the information, because we can always manipulate data, right? But have the data that's actually reflective of the situation on the ground. So.
I actually think that we could do that. I think that would not be as hard to pull off. So thank you. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Ricky Ribeiro, and I am a Kennedy Cluster Coordinator, and I'm also a member of the Black Coalition for Excellence in Education. I have a daughter who's a 7th grader at Odessa Shannon Middle School, and my son graduated from Kennedy High School last year. My first question is, you talked about the federal budget and the impacts of that potentially going away, but you did not mention the $1.5 billion deficit at the state level, which is also tied to the blueprint, and how that might impact MCPS, which is specifically tied to community schools, which is supposed to close gaps in schools that have higher needs and greater needs. And then my second question is, you're talking about investments that the system has made. One of those investments was in the anti-racism audit and action plan, and I have not heard how that is being carried forward. It seems like it has been put in a drawer and ignored, and for Black parents like myself, that work is incredibly important, and I want to know how you're going to continue to invest in that for Black students specifically.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Okay, blueprint, great question. Let's start there. I am so curious to see what is going to come next with our friends in Annapolis and the blueprint. I'm not sure exactly the best course of action or even what I would recommend at this point, because I think that they're struggling to have a state budget where they can cover what they've already committed to, let alone what happens next. I will say that we do not select which schools get identified as community schools and supported with community schools, but get ready for this. Montgomery County is the only county in Maryland that has a local share in the cost of funding community schools. So when the state identifies one of our schools as a community school, we pick up part of the cost, and that is unique in Maryland. Now, that being said, the system, the framework, the wraparound services, I'm all for it. I think that it's brilliant. I think that there's elements of that that really work. I'm not sure that there is the through line with academic performance that they claim that there is. I'm not convinced. That being said, the social emotional support and the things that we do see with community schools that are really tangible, there's tremendous growth, tremendous improvement. And I'll give you an example. You can't discipline trauma. You can't. And when kids have experienced a significant amount of trauma and they have what's called an ACEs score, which is an Adverse Childhood Experiences score, that's so high and they have behavioral issues, that's not something that can be fixed by the school's code of conduct. You need wraparound services. You need access to community resources, and having a built-in mechanism like community schools is a great idea. I mean, it really is. The question at hand that Mr. Ribeiro is bringing up for those who are not quite following is that sustainable? Am I getting on the right track?
Well, that's one of the things that would
Yeah.
be threatened if we lost it.
And so I think that this is a good enough idea that if we've started down the path with a community school, we've got to be committed to providing that service, even if the state decides to make some changes. As a matter of fact, I think that we are almost entering like a social contract with the community. And whether it's a program, like an academic program, or whether it's a community schools, or whether it's something else, that if we have a group of kids that are accessing a service, it's almost like we need to be committed to providing that service. Or unless the data is so compellingly changed in a different direction that we need to reevaluate, like an entire community up and moves or something like that. So I think that that's similar to the federal government and the dilemma with the federal government. We need to have a backup plan and we need to be prepared for what those changes may look like. I think that it's more likely that the state will push more of its pension burden onto us and more of its special education cost burden onto us. We kind of have been seeing that coming from a million miles away. We kind of know that that's likely to occur. And I think that that's because they want to fund community schools. So I think the difference between the federal dynamic and the state dynamic is that the state government wants to do the right thing and can't afford it. The federal government can afford it and won't do the right thing, if that makes any sense. I couldn't agree more with the anti-racist audit. It is due for a report to the Board of Education. It needs to be an annual report. That has not been something that has taken place. And there needs to be data to back up each of the findings and action steps. I think it would help if we landed on getting a full-time equity director, which we haven't done, and need to move that along. But I think you can expect to have a report as scheduled in early 2026, which is just a couple months away, and hold us accountable to the findings that are there. There's some encouraging data that we can celebrate, And then there's some things that continue to be frustrating and that we're going to need a lot of community support and feedback on how we might address them. And I'll give you some examples. We have seen a precipitous drop in hate bias incidents this year compared to previous years. That's a good news. But I will say that just the numbers don't tell the entire story, that even though there might be a drop in some of the numbers, like what's happening in those incidents are meaningful and need to be considered and addressed, and that the severity also needs to be something that gets highlighted. Last year, we had a school that had not just one, not just two, but a string of events that caused significant turmoil in the school. There were kids who didn't feel safe coming to school. There were staff members who didn't feel safe coming to school. We had to make a change in the leadership of that school. We're not afraid to do that. If we need to do that, we need to do that. That's a part of us holding that social contract of following through with these expectations. But I don't want there to ever be a moment where we think, oh gosh, we took care of that school's not racist anymore. That work is going to continue for generations at that school to fix some of the issues going on with that school. Continuing to hire a diverse workforce at that school is going to continue to be a challenge in order for kids to feel seen, loved, and appreciated, if not just even welcome. So there are areas of the county that we can be really proud of some of the progress that's been made. And then there are areas of the county where we need to be really disappointed. And not just disappointed and frustrated, but have really clear action steps of clearly this isn't working, clearly this isn't serving a diverse needs of our students. This is what we have to do, or else we have to make changes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. I think you guys are going to be our last two, and then we're going to switch to email comments. Go ahead. You got this.
I don't want to take her time. Good evening. Hi, my name is Miss Egwem, and I have two kids at Springbrook. In the IB program, I have a senior, and I have a sophomore. Then I have a son in middle school, which I wish I didn't have that, so I don't have to. So that the whole,
You're
whatever
stuck
is
with
going to
me.
be happening.
Yeah.
So now I got to still advocate. That's why
know.
Kendra's in there. She ain't got no questions because she's almost done with this, but it matters to us. So just wanted to, it shouldn't be complicated, but here at Springbrook, we have been able to create a parent community for our IB program because like you mentioned, I know you mentioned that some schools come together and their alumni and they do things to support. And so we've done that. It's a relatively new organization. It's IB Connect and my co-founder's right there. So it's relatively new. We're doing that. We're not great at raising a lot of money, but what we're doing is just creating a community for success.
That's amazing.
Because success matters to us and to for our children. And we also have an understanding that I don't think the system can do it all, or it takes a long time and we just don't want to wait because it matters to us. And so I just think it's important for you to know that within the school community, we have that, we're interested, and we're doing what we can here. So that as we speak and say the things we're talking about, I want you to know that we've put in a lot of effort, time, and energy into that. So maybe not a lot of people are here today, however, Springbrook cares, and we are determined to ensure that the school system works for us, right? And a question was asked last year, I remember, because if you Google my name now, you would see the question was asked, and the question was really about ensuring that Springbrook IB program has the same resources as Richard Montgomery or other more affluent areas or where that are more of a priority to the county, right? And I know that it was answered that that would be looked into. And a year later, we're here, and I showed up again. So I don't think we're there, but I do appreciate the fact that you said that we should see some changes in the coming 24 months?
Yeah, so let me answer it explicit because we got a little bit of a different audience. So I'm gonna put Ms. Valentine on the spot again. How much do you get from MCPS for your IB program? They just gave you the answer, Stephanie. Zero. That has got to change. And so interestingly enough, Richard Montgomery also gets zero, but the difference is that they have found mechanisms to disproportionately support their program using school-based staffing, school-based resources, and they've made other commitments. It's brutal. I don't think that you should have to open your wallet for your kid to have a great experience. As a matter of fact, I think that any change that we make moving forward with programs needs to ensure that you don't have to open your wallet to make sure that your kid has a great program. It breaks my heart that you have gone to the trouble to create a community of support and that finances loom in the background as a factor. Because I gotta tell you, that is a major problem. And that is something that we should solve for you. That can be our burden. Now, you loving on the kids and making sure that they feel supported and that they know when their IB test is and that they know that they've got high expectations, please continue to do that. Recruit as many friends as humanly possible. Do all the things, you know, if you feel motivated, cupcakes, sugar, and kids. I know that my nutrition people would say no to that, but I say yes to that. Make it happen. But I think that there has been a resource gap. You are right. And that resource gap we have not created, but we have supported the environment that has allowed it to be created. And so we need to change the dynamic for Springbrook, and it needs to be our choice to view the Springbrook IB program through an equity lens and disproportionately create resources that support Springbrook specifically so that you don't have to open your wallet.
Yeah, and so that's why I was concerned when I heard about the fact that new programs are going to be opening. Because if our outcomes aren't showing the success that we would like, and I don't think it's because of the students or the teachers, I actually think it's just, the program needs to be strengthened.
Yes.
Most students might need tutoring, but they're ready and they're able and they're capable. So I think it's a
100%.
combination of everything, right? So with new programs that will require resources, having 2 kids in IB now, I know what's required to complete such a rigorous program. And so that implementation is going to take effort, time, and money. How are we finding money for that? Well, we don't have money for what exists already.
So interestingly enough, we're not talking about that much money relative to other things. So for the cost of replacing one HVAC system at one school, I can fund program expansion for the entire county. Seriously, that's the cost differential. And if I had to choose, I pick the programs every single time. If that's my trade-off, absolutely. We had a fund balance last year, what, 17 million in our fund balance? 23 million? Okay. And this is a $6 million expenditure. We got this. We can do it. We just have to decide that we want to do it.
So are those programs going to have a budget?
Yeah, that's the whole point.
Okay. Alongside the existing programs, right?
I think it's a necessity. I think the big weakness is that we've stood up things in the past and we didn't give them a budget. And so the way that we fix that is we actually plan for it.
So on my list is more so the resources to support the students that are capable. They're capable and they're able. They need the
Totally.
resources. The outcomes, the data for the outcomes is critical because if you don't have data, you can't improve, right? Mm-hmm. So I love your transparency. I actually do like your transparency because I feel that any question we've asked, you've kind of answered it and you've not gone around. So it's nice, right? So the resources.
I wish I had better answers to some of the questions, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I also like the fact that you're telling me that you don't have solutions to everything. Well, that makes us know, that, and then we can also communicate to you that we would like you guys to think about that, you know. So the outcomes, the resources, security, and also.
Can I ask real quick what you want to see with security?
I don't know much. It just sounds like it's a priority of the school.
It is,
So
but
I wouldn't, I wouldn't say that I have any concerns about it, but security system. Okay, the principal said she said security system, so that's why I said I don't have a lot of issues with it, but security system.
I see you, Miss Valentine.
Yes. 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 So the security systems, I loved what Lynn and some other parents said about really starting to think about preparing them in elementary and middle
Yes,
school. It's
critical.
not preparing a lot of kids for high school. And so they are stressed out and they're not doing well because they didn't even develop the habits and homework, things like that.
Yeah.
Accountability, having the ability to do the work. And so with the parent that complained about, oh, they have 10 days, that shouldn't matter if they've developed that discipline, right? So if they are developing that discipline at an old age, and just finding a way, because I know that there's not a lot of desire for a lot of homework, but developing the discipline and the skills to succeed in high school. So they don't go from absolutely no accountability. Now you enter a program and you need to turn something in 10 days. It's difficult. You don't know how to advocate and stuff like that. So I think those programs in middle school and elementary school, developing that discipline within the students, providing opportunities, like in White Oak now, there's a project success thing they have, but it's very small. And my son joined it and I realized it's such a good program, but
Right.
there's not enough people that would be able to do this. And so again, that's the whole equity thing. So equity has different forms. You know, equity is not only farms, it's not only,
Correct.
ESOL. Equity is also parents like me who make enough not to be on farms maybe, but don't make enough to maybe go to another county or buy another house
Right.
or things. A lot of parents here are in that category. We want our community to work for us. We don't want to have to move. We're in our 40s. We don't want to have to do that, right? Oh, I'm in my 40s. So I don't want to have to do that.
I don't want you to do that either.
We want it to work for us. Right now, some of the things that I should be a priority is a lot of people have been laid off. There's a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of chaos. There's just chaos and there's unpredictability. So our public school system now probably might be more burdened, but this is also an opportunity for this to work for us. Because the more students that are going in that are supported, that do better, our counties are better, our home values increase, and things like that happen. Even for us as parents, coming together, showing up for things like this matter for our community. If we take an ownership in our community, he'll come back and he'll know that people here care. And that's important. People of all color, of all backgrounds care about our children. That's why we're here, and my kids are home. I could have been there with them. So outcomes, resources, field trips, opportunities, and really just investing in the younger age for now. So I will come back and ask again.
No, that's great.
Next year.
So can I share a curiosity that I have? And I think that this is something for all of us to watch. And then we got one more person who can ask a question or say something and communicate something that they're interested in. I am super curious how this group of third graders performs. And the reason that I'm curious about this group of third graders, this is our first big cohort of post-COVID third graders. So this is a group that I have kind of been watching, like how they did in kindergarten, how they did in first grade, how they did in second grade, how they did in third grade. I have a lot of reason to be optimistic. Far from where we want to be, of course, but I'm really curious at the post-COVID impact versus our kids who have kind of been that bubble group of kids that have gone through the system that effectively got trapped with a little bit of 2 years of COVID brain, and the big failed experiment of virtual whatever the heck that was, that didn't work for everybody. and we lost some time for sure. And there hasn't been a great plan on how to catch them up either. And so a significant amount of skill development was lost. The good news with the curriculum is that it effectively spirals. So you get the same concept again later on in the curriculum as the kids get older. But if you've missed a critical part early on, you're still going to be struggling to catch up conceptually. So let's watch, let's see. Yeah. I think that there are some positive things happening with literacy. I'm less convinced with math, but I think that there are some things that we're going to be real happy with, at least from a progress standpoint, and then some things that we're concerned about and that we're going to have to stay focused on. All right.
I agree.
All right, thank you. You're up. All right, you get to take us home, and then everybody can go back to their kids.
It's a big responsibility.
Yes, Ms. Chase.
After you're done. Okay.
Okay.
No, actually, that's better. I don't want to wrap things up. It's a lot of
All
responsibility.
right, I want to get everybody home, though.
Yes,
So.
so do I. My topic is different than what we've talked about. It's related, but different. I'm a teacher in MCPS, and I have a student in the IB program here, a freshman.
Awesome.
I would like to talk about ADHD and
Okay.
neurodiversity. I would like to know what the county's plan is for addressing students who are neurodiverse, students in particular who have ADHD. The numbers of students that have ADHD are comparable to students with IEPs.
Right.
But we don't address the needs of students with ADHD to the same degree we address the students with IEPs. We should address students with IEPs with a lot more greater support, 100%. I'm with you on that, and I'm so grateful that you're addressing that. But I have a student with ADHD. I work with students who have ADHD who are diagnosed. I work, and many teachers would tell you that we work with a lot of students who may not have ADHD by diagnosis, but may exhibit characteristics and may need supports that are similar to students who have ADHD. So my question is, again, what is the county doing? This is something that you had mentioned, which was inspiring, that the county would like to know about things that maybe the county isn't doing.
Right.
And I think this is an area of growth for us as a county and as a society in general. It's not going away. It's actually growing. And we know with technology, the way that it is. For example, I have a student who is my own student who does all of their work on their Chromebook. But as many other students do, it's difficult for them to focus while they're doing all of their work on a Chromebook.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, my child has ADHD, and so it's doubly hard for them to focus on their assignment. So there's so many layers to this. I want to know what the discussions are at the county level. I want to know when professionals are going to be placed in every school who know more about ADHD. I want to know about coaching for students with ADHD. I want to know when more than just one counselor per school manages all of the students in the school with ADHD. So there's a lot of layers to this, and
And then
I want
if
to know the kind of conversations
you're also hooked up with a 504 plan, like that's not going awesome either, and the 504 load is pretty significant as well.
So
Yeah.
like you have one counselor per elementary school who manages all of the students in the school, and if it's about 1 in 10 students, and so in a school of 400, whatever, you can do the numbers. That's too many students for them to do their job as a counselor and to manage students who have ADHD, and to give trainings and professional development to all the teachers who work with those students that have ADHD, who don't have push-in support or pull-out support from special education teachers.
Yeah. So I've got 5 kids, and 2 of them are biologically mine, and the other 3 are just kids that are tagged to me through marriage. And Here's what I can tell you as a parent of 5, and fortunately I'm an empty nester now for the first time last year, is that the first one fools you and makes you think you can have more of them. And the second one, you take a look and you're like, maybe not as good as the first one. The third one, and it's like, oh my gosh, what happened? My youngest is definitely a ball of ADHD, and definitely struggles with this. And I don't think that her needs were really well met in her school environment either. So I don't think we're necessarily an outlier, and that's not an excuse. But I really appreciate you elevating that, because that has not been front and center with a lot of the things that we've brought up. So I want to thank you for putting something up on the board that we really haven't spent a lot of time talking about. In my experience, where I have seen this go really well is it looks like a couple of things. Putting the 504 plan responsibilities solely on the counselors may not necessarily be the best strategy, because their day-to-day interaction with kids, it may be limited because their caseload might be hundreds of children that they see sporadically, not regularly. And so at the elementary level in particular, even if we did utilize the counselors, we're not staffing counselors at the same level that we staff at the high school or even at the middle school level. So I think that there is probably the need for us to get really smart about how we do 504 coordination, and whatever solution that we have right now, it's not working because we haven't set up a structure for it to work. It's not one person's responsibility, and truth be told, it really shouldn't be one person's responsibility. It should be a team approach and a team responsibility, but there's gotta be at least one person who carries the administrative burden, and tacking it on to somebody else's job isn't helping anyone. You brought up a really interesting point that I don't have an answer to, and I wish I had a better answer to this, is how do we close the gap in terms of knowledge about understanding ADHD and what the classroom experience is and what the student experience is, because I don't think that there's enough training across the county. And does this need to be something that is more pervasive for instructional staff? And it probably does. So other than to say thank you and appreciate you elevating this, I don't know enough to answer what we are actually doing. I do have some ideas of what I've seen work well in other places, but I appreciate you elevating it, because it's not something that made the cut or the list, but I promise you that it will show up on a future slide. So if you attend our virtual meeting tomorrow, you will see ADHD represented along with several of the other ideas tonight presented. All right, Ms. Chase, you get to close us out, because these people need to go home.
Dr. Taylor. Hi, everybody. My name is Marlia Chase. So I'm not going to ask my question. This parent has a question, and I want us all to be supportive of her, because she's going to ask her question in Spanish.
Okay.
And I'm going to do my very best
We got it.
to translate. So,
Ok. Yo voy a hacer la pregunta, o más que todo la sugerencia en español. Como padres, queremos comprender de qué manera piensa abordar los programas y viví título 1 en las escuelas del condado. Estos proyectos ya reciben recursos millonarios destinados a apoyar a nuestros estudiantes en las escuelas elementarias. Para nosotros es fundamental que exista un sistema de monitoreo real y constante para evaluar su implementación. Nos preocupa que los fondos se utilicen de manera efectiva y transparente. Solicitamos que se revisen las escuelas beneficiadas y se informe públicamente si los programas están siendo aplicados correctamente y los resultados están siendo medibles.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna do my best. Okay. Well, where? So she asked, Dr. Taylor, could you please tell us how you would support EBB and Title I programs, and more importantly, ensure that their implementation is done correctly and have impact? It is important that as we support these programs with millions, that there be some way to ensure that programs are being effective.
Yeah.
We need this transparency for all.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having the courage to come up and talk, everybody who's had a chance to come up and talk. And this is a pretty impactful question. Candidly, there's not a whole lot that me personally, that I as one individual am going to do to validate that Title I programs and EBB programs are gonna be awesome and successful. But I'm gonna tell you what the system does and how you can access what that looks like. So at least at the Title I level, we do perform some audit function of what happens at the school, and ultimately there's performance data that will be a result as to what happens. I will say in general, Title I support does translate more often than not in higher supported performance relative to outcomes without Title I. I'm less concerned about there being efficacy in the Title I environment, and maybe a lot more concerned about EBB supports and what you might see in a special education classroom. And to tell you the truth, I don't have the foggiest clue. And so I'm really glad that you brought it up tonight, because I'm not sure that we have the accountability mechanism that you're looking for, or at least not one that I can think of like how we do that. And I need to make sure that we do have something that does support that, because I'm not sure that we do have that level of accountability. And the part that's really scary about that is when you're receiving that level of service as a parent, that you may have a lot of questions about what happens in that classroom during the day. And to not have a clear line of communication or a clear understanding of what's happening in the classroom could have really disastrous outcomes if something bad is happening in the classroom. So,
So she's saying that, with a school system that has $3.6 billion, she's not seeing the progress.
yeah, and she's right.
Emerging multilingual learner parents are not seeing the progress. And so what can be done?
Yeah, and she's right, and I'm not sure. If anything, that's on us to come up with a better accountability system to support that. So I'm sorry that we don't have that right now, and you're right, and we need to. That's on us to do better. We just need to do better. Thank you guys for spending family time with me instead of family. Hopefully it was a welcome departure for at least a little bit of a break, or you can come home with takeout as a hero to your family or something along those lines. But if not, a year ago when I was doing a lot of town hall style engagement, I'd say, hey, if you didn't get a question answered, email me and I'll write you back. Reality is I've probably got about 100 emails just sitting here. I probably won't write you back, but I can make sure that somebody does if I don't get a chance to write you back. But if I'm lucky enough and I do get a chance to write you back, please send me an email anyway. I do want to make sure that if you have a question that didn't get answered, that it does actually get answered. So even if it's not from me directly, I do want to make sure that you hear from somebody. I did get a little backed up on the emails this fall, but I do want to make sure that if you got a question, it gets answered. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us tonight. Please feel free to share more of it as you think about it. don't hesitate, don't hold back. I don't take it personally. If you've got a criticism, that we have a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot that we need to do. And so I think we get better when we confront those issues, not when we run from them and when we hide from them. So thank you all so much and have a lovely evening.